Hello, welcome to Crow's Corner. I'm Jenny. In this episode, I'll be teaching you a very basic beginner's needle felting project. I'm calling it a cat loaf. Throughout the video, I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to use your needle correctly and how to use the wool so that you can get the best shape out of your project. You will need a piece of foam or some kind of needle felting surface. You will need some wool roving, which is the most rough, basic, processed kind of wool that is out there. And I will put in my description where I think some of the best places are to purchase wool. Serafina Fiber Arts is one of them. You can increase the, beauty or complexity of this by getting some top coat wool, which is finer and comes in like a silkier texture or smoother texture. And also, depending on which cat you are making, you will need to choose your colors accordingly. I prefer to use a 40 gauge needle, and in the spiral form, triangle or spiral I think are the best. And then this tool right here is one that has just multiple needles in it to needle felt like bigger surfaces. I think the 40 gauge needle is a very lightweight barbed needle, and I feel like I have more control over that. Some needles you punch in and just like totally flattens your project. For this project, you will also need a ruler of some sort. For the body of the cat, you will want to start by taking some plain core wool. This does not need to be the color of your cat, although I think a lighter core wool looks better underneath the top layers that you're going to put on there. Take about a foot or foot and a half of the wool roving and then gently stretch it out. And then start to wrap it around your ruler. When you're doing this, make sure that you keep it flat and go back and forth in sort of a figure 8 or a crisscross pattern so that it's a little bit fuller in the middle and not so full on the edges. Once you have everything wrapped up neatly, just kind of brush the wool down and it will temporarily stay in place, and carefully pull it off. I will be speeding up a lot of the felting process just because it does take so long, but obviously don't go this fast. You're going to take your 40 gauge needle and you're going to carefully tack in the end of that wool roving strand, and then go on each end of the little ball that you're making, and at an angle or at various angles as you continue to turn this ball around, you want to felt in the end so it forms a round sort of bread-like shape, and you do that on both ends. Now, I don't overfelt my wool sculptures. I tend to be very gentle and light with the way that I bounce the needle into the wool. And again, with the 40 gauge needle, it's not as harsh, but really, I feel like the lighter the hand, the less your sculpture is to smush out of shape. And once that first ball is done, which is going to be the body, you're going to get another piece that's maybe just a little less than a foot long, and you want to stretch that out, same core wool, and this is going to be for the head. And I start by just tucking that top end over and then carefully rolling the end in and folding the sides in as I go and continue rolling it. So you're creating a small ball. It's going to be about a third of the size of the body. I didn't need to use all of that wool, and it's okay to pull it off if you have too much. And fold in those last little pieces, and then carefully use your needle to tack that down. And again, go at it from different angles. Roll the ball around, go at it from the side, the top. Different angles will help to keep the shape that you are making and not flatten out your piece. So now we have the body and the head. And then the next thing we're gonna make is the nose or the muzzle of the cat. So really this is maybe just a finger's length of wool, and doing it the same way as the head, you're just gonna roll it in and tuck the sides in and continue to roll. Alright, so now we have the body, the head, and the muzzle. And this is all going to be covered with a top coat. So this is like the stuffing inside of a stuffed animal. It's just giving it the form and shape that we need. Now the cat that I'm making is white and gray, so I'm taking a little bit of gray top coat. It's sort of a finer combed wool, and about maybe a hand's length of it or a little bit more. And I cut it so that I just or didn't cut it, sorry, I pulled a piece off that's just a little bit of the width. I didn't need all of that width, and stretched it out. Now, I recommend you use a pencil and not a cutting knife like I did. I'm not sure why I picked this. Maybe it was the closest at hand, but it wasn't the safest choice. And you wrap going down the pencil or the handle, and then pulling tightly, you're going to wrap back up in the opposite direction. So the fibers sort of cross over each other. Okay, now this is a little tricky. If you don't do this carefully, you could break your needle. I am just gently sticking that needle along the edge of the handle. I go down one side and then I'll turn it and do the other, and that just carefully tacks it in place temporarily. I will be sliding this off, but if I try to slide it off before I do this, it'll fall apart. So be very careful. You do not want to break your needle on the handle, so just go right along the edge. Now once you've slid it off the handle, it's still very loosely felted, so be careful. And I go along the whole length of it and then rotate. You do not want to over felt in one direction because it will flatten it. So do a little bit at a time and keep rolling and keep going around the whole piece. This is going to be the tail, by the way, if I didn't say that. And for this tail, I do like to rub this between my hands, and it will sort of give a lot of friction to the wool, and the wool will mat together. Now this is just kind of measuring out how long the tail should be, and this is way too long, so I'm going to cut off the end, which I would recommend cutting off one end anyways, even if it's just a tiny bit, because you're going to fray out that end, and that's what you're going to use to tack it on to the back of the cat. So the bottom end of the tail, I kind of tuck that in a little bit and poke it in from the side before I go over and finish felting this tail. Continue rolling and going from different directions. Now, my cat's tail is striped, so I'm using a slightly darker piece of gray wool. I don't need very much of it, just a little piece, and I stretch it out so it's nice and thin. In fact, I even split it down the middle because I didn't need that much. And once you have the appropriate amount, again, a little goes a long way with this wool, and I always highly err on less wool. You can add more, it's harder to take it away. Stretch this out so it's nice and thin. And then I'm going to start wrapping the tail in this so I create a striped pattern down the tail. I'm kind of pulling it gently as I go, getting it on there nice and snug. Once you have it wrapped, you're just going to go over the whole tail again and felt this onto there. Again, just roll the tail as you're felting and go at it from different directions. Now pull open the end so it's kind of fuzzy. You really want this to be loose. Don't felt that. Nice and tight and felted really well. So we have the body, the head, the nose. Let's attach the head. Place it at one end of the body and just go around the bottom edge to tack it on there. You don't want to flatten the head by using the needle straight on the head, just right around the edge. And that will tack it in place enough. You can test the angle. I think it needs to be pointed down just a little bit more. So pushing that down some and then tacking that sort of chin area in just a little bit more. Okay, now we're going to put the muzzle on, the little nose. You're going to go around the edge and tack this in place as well. And as I was doing this, I noticed that it's sticking out a little bit more than I like, so I went ahead and just sort of flattened it out a little bit more. That's just going to depend on how big you made this little ball of wool and how flat you want your cat's nose to be. So this top coat is a very lovely white top coat, and I'm going to be using white and gray, and it's way more than I need, so I'm going to split it in half. It's maybe about a hand's length, and then splitting it in half, and then splitting it again, so I use about a quarter of the width of this. Really stretch this out so it's nice and thin. Don't need a lot for the top coat as far as thickness goes. And so I'm breaking this into 3 different pieces because I will be using this later. I'm going to set it off to the side. And the same goes for the gray, for my cat's colors, white and gray. Split that in half and split it again in quarters, and then stretch it very, very thin. And I'm actually, for this gray, I want it to be super short, so I'm pulling it and pulling it and pulling it until I get the fibers as short as I can get them. Good quality wool goes a long way in making your project look really good. I highly recommend finding a good quality wool. So this is some even smaller pieces. These are going to be, I believe, for the ears, so I want them to be as short of fibers as possible. I'm going to split this in half so I have 2 little bundles. The ears are going to be very thin. Don't try to do too much wool. As I pull it apart, I just stack it back on top and then pull again, and I continue doing that until I feel like I've gotten it as short as I can. Now I kind of laid these on their sides. You'll see in a minute I'm going to be creating a little triangular shape for the ears, and you'll have to imagine it's right way up because I did it from the side. And you start by creating a little channel down the middle of each piece. Just use your needle and just tap back and forth and make a straight line. And then to create the triangle, from one side of that line you go at an angle upward and then fold that over and tack that into place. I'm not doing any heavy felting yet, just tacking it. And then you go another line down in an angle, flip that over, and then tack it into place. So if you turn your head sideways, you can see a little triangle shape now, and that's going to be the ear. Do the same for the other ear. Draw your line upward at an angle, fold over the loose fibers and tack them down, and then draw another line downward at an angle and fold those fibers over and tack them. Now I'm going to peel these off. You don't want to get it too stuck on there. Actually, it looks like I'm folding over the edge a little because it was too wide on this one. But you do want to, after you do your initial tack, you want to peel these off of the foam so that it doesn't get stuck there. I just lift them up and put them right back into place. And then I'm going to use my punch felter that has several needles, and this helps for flat surfaces like this ear, and you can go over it very quickly. And then I flip it over and do the other side as well. The punch tool I find is good for flat surfaces, but not so good for 3D sculpted things like the body. It's just too hard, and it just really flattens things out. Now, I wouldn't normally recommend cutting wool that's been felted, although I'm sure you can and do some really cool things with it, but I don't usually. But I will use it to like trim off a few like stray fibers, stray hairs. When you cut it, you do risk that the piece will fall apart. And so there's the two ears. If you have too much on the bottom, you can pull that off. Notice that I didn't really felt the bottom of it very much, and that's because you're going to use that to attach it to the head. Now I need to make the little pink parts, the insides of the ears. So using even less wool than I did for the ears, I'm going to break these pink wool fibers, into really, really short pieces. And I'm going to do the exact same thing I did for the ears. You create your little center line, and then your triangular shape, folding one edge in and then folding the other edge in. You see I have these actually the correct way facing up. And again, don't needle felt the bottom edge. Use the punch tool. I peel these up, and then I'm going to flip them over and punch tool the back side. Okay, now this should fit right on that ear. And just tack it down with your single needle. And don't felt the bottom. If you over punch this, some of the pink fibers will stick out the back of the ear. So I just do it very, very lightly to tack it in place. Okay, now I'm going to start covering the body of the cat using some of that white top coat wool that I showed you earlier. And I start by covering the head, and I'll do the top of the head first. It really doesn't matter. You're going to cover the whole body, but lightly tack this wool into place and go at it from every direction so you don't flatten the underneath part of the sculpture. But you just want to create like a skin, basically. And you should still see the form and the shape underneath, but you aren't like really doing many details at this point. Just get everything tacked in place, and then you can go back and you can create more shape and form with the top coat if you need to. So I did the top of the head and then the bottom of the head, and both of those kind of wrapped onto the back and the belly a little bit. But I will also, here you see, cover the back end of the cat as well. And whatever color or main color your cat is, that's what you're going to do during this part. Now I'm going in at a slower, more careful pace and really giving it a little bit more shape wherever I feel like it needs to be tacked down and pushed down just a little bit more, wherever it needs to be felted some more. And look at your cat from all different angles to make sure you're not smushing things down or missing a part that needs to be felted in a little bit more. You can see his little face and his body, it's coming together. Now let's attach the tail. So again, loosen up that end, that rough end. You want to kind of loosen that as much as you can because you're going to use those fibers to tack it onto the body. So on the back end, right where his little bum would be, you set that on there, and then using your single needle, you will tack it into place. Now, for my tail, it's the same color as what his back will be. So think about that. If your tail is a different color, you don't want a lot of that showing. You'll have to cover it up with whatever top coat you choose for your cat's back. So mine again is gray on the top of it. It's mostly white cat, but it's gray on the top. So I put the tail on with gray, and then I'll take some of this gray and lay it across the back of the cat, and that covers over that rough edge of the tail. And again, just tack it in gently first, and then you can go in, and if your cat has stripes, you can add stripes, or you missed a spot like I did here, you can add some more in, but go easy first and then go in and add the details that you need. Now I need to add the ears. These are a little bit tricky because they don't really want to stay curled like they should or curved in like they should. So I say just kind of get them tacked on at first. Don't worry too much about the curve. You can always go in and adjust that. Just and felting right at the base of the ear and tucking those stray edges in to try to get it attached to the head. But if you can get it curved, it'll look a lot better than if you have it just flat on there. Be careful not to be too hard on this part or you will flatten the face. So once I did the front, I'm going to go very carefully and slowly around the back bottom edge of the ear just to tack that down so that the ear stands straight up and doesn't have a tendency to flop over. You're going to be covering the base of this ear with whatever top coat you choose. So here I am covering the base of the ear and his forehead, and just lightly putting that on there, a very thin layer of wool. If your cat has a unique pattern to the front or the top of its head, here's where you would put that pattern in as well. And you can trim the edge of the wool if you want to give it a certain shape. I'm kind of splitting this wool and wrapping it around the base of the ear to cover over the rough edge of the ear. And so this cat has a little bit of gray on its cheek as well. Do the same for the other side. Look at it from every direction, make sure you've got that tacked down nicely. Now we want to wrap the tail around and tuck it under so it forms the cat loaf. I will press down the bottom of the tail and really get that tacked in nice and tight so it forms a round bottom for your cat. And then wrap the tail around. And you don't want to flatten the tail or misshapen your cat, so very carefully go along the edge, the top edge, and then the bottom edge of the tail, and just tack that in. And do the tip. The tip I usually do pretty good just to make sure that it doesn't come loose later. Going at it from an angle. And there's your basic shape. So I'm going to add in a little nose and mouth and eyes. You could keep it like this if you want a faceless cat. So I'm creating its little split lip and a little smile right on the end of the muzzle that we placed on there. And I'm placing my needle where I want the eyes to be, just creating a little indentation. And using the tiniest amount of black wool, I'm going to create a little slit for the eye. You could do a little round ball if you like a more round eye. Place it on the little mark that you made and tack in one end of it really carefully, and then follow the little line and tack in the other end. Really get this tacked in there good. Both eyes are done. I'm gonna do the nose. I take this tiny little piece of pink and I create a channel, kind of like we did for the ears, but I'm just gonna fold over the top edge and then kind of form it into a little triangle by pulling those sides inward. This doesn't have to be a perfect triangle, it's just so that you have a nice little nub for his nose. The bottom edge of this should be very loose. You place it on the little nose area right above the little crease for his mouth. Gently tack that in. Don't press too hard or you could flatten the nose too much. And using the little pieces hanging out of the bottom, I just pull those down into the little crease where his mouth is and follow that line straight down and tack it into his mouth. There you go. There's your cat loaf. I hope you enjoy this. This is a really fun project, and let me know if you make it. I would love to hear about how yours turned out. Thanks for watching, and make sure you hit the subscribe and like button and leave a comment below.